Well, if that doesn't motivate us to get things right, I don't know what will. Seriously, we're really aiming to target the problems in long-term finance by combining a bit of the style of the long now with some of the rigor of the Santa Fe Institute. And we've launched 4 cross-cutting programs, which I'll talk about briefly: the Eternal Coin, Meta-Commerce, and Financial Center Futures. The Eternal Coin is a long finance thought experiment and hopefully soon an online tool for education. And it speculates on whether a coin that never loses value could exist. As the journalist Simon Carr remarked, money turns out to be whatever we agree it to be. It is a collective work of the imagination. An eternal coin would be a call on future wealth. People have to surmise what their great-great-great-grandchildren will value. Dr. Malcolm Cooper has provided a fascinating booklet in search of the eternal coin. It's a long finance view of history, and it explores different views of eternal value over the ages. The eternal coin approach has already produced proposals for coins based on traded currencies, commodities, time to depletion of major resources, genetic materials, stories, and excess capacities on reciprocal exchanges. Meta-Commerce, our second strand, is really trying to engage the long finance community to set out a network of important questions in economics, finance, and society. This strand was inspired by the Millennium Master Awards of the Clay Institute, and thus in turn, David Hilbert's 23 questions for mathematicians at the beginning of the 20th century, back in 1900. These questions, we think, should be of use to researchers in finance and economics, getting them to focus on what might matter a bit more. Some of the samples up here against our themes include looking at what can we learn from the economics of harsh climates, the Inuit or the Bushmen. What can we learn from organizations that have lasted millennia? And what are the real finances of the Vatican? There we go. Some sample questions here are, we talk about countercyclical measures at the moment to safeguard financial systems, but I would ask, at first, how do you know there's a cycle at all? If you do know there's a cycle, how long is it? And if you know that, how are you actually able to price countercyclicality? When you use historic data to assert a financial trend, how far back is that data valid? Is an institution that is too connected to fail, or too big to fail, too big to regulate? Why do pension funds trade so much? These are, we think, some of the deeper questions that finance departments ought to be focused on, not awarding PhDs for torturing data on a hypothesis somewhere between the weak and the strong market. It teaches good statistics, but it doesn't teach much finance. Our third program, London Accord, we've been running really since before this in 2005. And there's some people in the audience, Alice Chappell, have been really amazingly helpful on that. This has been a program which has now released over 120 investment research reports from the city. And the objective here is to get dialogue between policymakers and the city, as well as the general public. And these reports have been put up by many of you present here at research departments for free, for the benefit of all. And finally, we have a program, Financial Center Futures, which is exploring how financial centers might work over the time period that we're addressing, roughly 100 years. People anticipate large changes to the structure of the entire global financial system. Will financial centers exist in 100 years? So these are the sorts of things that we're working on. What's interesting to me is that we haven't really, as yet, come to any big conclusions, although I will say that we have some interesting thoughts, for example, on climate change, index-linked carbon bonds, which basically function like bond cuffs, so government officials don't stand before you talking about policies, they actually have skin in the game. Pensions indemnity insurance, capacity exchanges, and some interesting, much deeper thinking about the use of appropriate discount rates. So this isn't some kind of airy-fairy academic thing. We're really trying to get to grips with the problems we think have been ignored because they are, to a degree, difficult or wicked problems. We've repeatedly found, though, that the best examples of longevity, interestingly, seem to come back to some principles that were explored by Elinor Ostrom, the Nobel Prize winner, in her research on successful commons. And that's really that all this is based around communities. And she was exploring things as, well, if we say that systems are broken, why is it that the Spanish Huerta system has operated for nearly a millennium. Why is it the Balinese irrigation systems go back nearly 1,500 years and seem to function? We're also tumbling across some old truisms. Brandon Davies of GARP noticed that perhaps Western finance is actually a subset of Islamic finance, not the other way around. If you look, the religions of the book share a number of principles. Let's just take 5 quick ones. A prohibition on interest, capital having a social purpose, clear contracts, including selling things you don't own, restrictions on seizing security, as well as banned investments in alcohol, gambling, and drugs. Well, many of our Western financial practices are actually ones that temporarily, supposedly for the greater good, permit suspension of religions of the book rules. For example, one good principle is surely that you know your counterparty. Well, we suspend this principle on exchanges, both in the way that we permit trades and trade reporting. We do this for the sake of liquidity. But it got out of control in the disconnected anonymous changes to CDO. Another principle in religions of the book finance is that the lender must share risk. Sounds great, but we whinge that this shows just how antiquated these religions are. This principle wouldn't permit fixed interest lending, nor a lot of other financial structures. This principle would equally reduce abuse of leverage, though. And holding to both these principles would pretty much rule out high-frequency trading. Finally, I guess as an imbiber rather than an abstainer, I didn't like the prohibition on alcohol. But the deeper point in this is that you have to respect your own society's laws and mores and not go up to the edge. Well, while there is as yet no grand unified theory of commerce, and may never be, I think we still find it worthwhile to embark on a journey that explores the tools and ideas that can help society make better decisions. We would suggest 4 basic areas of knowledge, or streams, that we believe need to be included and integrated in order to understand and explain everything that has to do with the price of fish. The first would be choice, understanding how people develop knowledge and biases and how these perceptions affect behavior. Normative aspects of choice, such as fairness, trust, and ethics, feature here. Secondly, we would look at economics, pondering models of exchange between people and expanding the debate about the role of government and social institutions. Thirdly, we would look at systems. In the world of commercial and political economics, systems thinking encourages us to break down complex systems into subsystems with interlinked information loops, feed-forward feedback. Why is it that negative feedback loops are always so much longer than positive feedback loops? And fourthly, evolution. In particular, innovation and competitive selection. We don't know all the answers today. And this stream, I think, highlights that wicked problems which seem intractable might be solved if you have a little bit of faith and allow yourself to evolve towards incomplete solutions. A good example of this would be current debates on climate change. We combine these streams on a note that we are getting close to understanding commerce in ways that may provide sustainable, real commerce across space and time. And that leads me to my second point. There's an old, second story on fish. There's an old financial market story about how fish trading works. Back in the early 1900s, on rumors that sardines had disappeared from their traditional waters in Monterey, California, commodity traders started to bid up the price of tinned sardines. A vibrant market ensued, and the price of a tin went through the roof, a classic bubble. This fervent trading went on for some time, and one day a buyer, having done very well, chose to treat himself to an expensive stack. He actually opened a tin and ate the sardines. They tasted awful and made him feel ill. So the buyer called the seller and said, "These sardines are no good." The seller said, "You don't understand. Those are not eating sardines.